Very much, Acting Speaker. The opposition has sought, both during the government and during its term of the previous Rudd-Gillard governments, to have a bipartisan support on national security, and the members for Gellibrand, Holt and myself, there couldn't be stronger supporters of that general attitude. Support for this resolution is clear from members of the opposition. Support for the views of the member for Holt, and agreement with the overall perspective put by the member for Barara about what a great country Australia is also implicit in my attitudes. To give some context to this resolution, the opposition has worked hard to improve and ultimately support two tranches of national security legislation that the Parliament debated over the last 12 months, and more recently the metadata legislation. There were valid privacy concerns with that legislation, but under the leadership of Bill Shorten and Mark Dreyfus, the opposition took the view, which is unfashionable with some, that the legislation was important and was needed. After all, police and other agencies already routinely access metadata. The Federal Police Commissioner Andrew Colvin said that between July and September of last year, metadata was used in 92% of counter-terrorism investigations, 87% of child protection investigations and 79% of serious organised crime. So far, this access has been unaccountable and not balanced by privacy considerations, properly supervised by Parliament or monitored by the Inspector General of Intelligence Security or the Commonwealth Ombudsman. Now, because we've passed this legislation together, this is all regularised. The dimensions of this problem were very clearly outlined by the member for Braddon in his remarks. The number of people who are actually involved. I think this Parliament, with its support for expenditure by the national security agencies and with its legislation, is working together to protect the safety of Australian people, and that is clearly, as the member for Holt and the member for Barara said, the greatest responsibility of Australian parliamentarians. We need to find the right balance between security and protection of privacy rights of individuals. Labor insisted that the original draft of the metadata legislation be sent back to the Parliamentary Joint Committee, and I suspect that the government will agree to these proposals on dual citizenship to be sent back to that committee that's done a great job in sending back to Parliament's recommendations on these important matters. I must say, at this point, one point I would like to correct, and that is the figures on expenditure on non-defence national security by activity in billions of dollars clearly show that between the years 2005 and 2007, and when Labor was elected, that the expenditure went up and has been maintained at a very high level in constant dollars. So the claim that we're not interested in this issue, clearly wrong, seen by both our actions in legislation and by expenditure. Now let me say something about Labor's fought for improved oversight at the Intelligence Committee by the Inspector General of Intelligence and Security, by the Ombudsman, and for sunset clauses. We successfully argued for the enforcement of strict standards of data security, including the requirement of stored data to be encrypted and a system of mandatory notifications of data breaches or privacy alerts. We also insisted that a public interest advocate protect journalists based on a similar system already in place in Victoria. Labor's view is that finding the right balance between security and freedom is an ongoing task. The government needs to respond to national security risks in a flexible manner, taking new measures, as the member for Braddon advocates. That's why Labor established in office the Independent National Security Monitor. Initially, the current government, through the member for Kooyong, took a rather ideological view about red tape on this. Fortunately, the kind of IPA ideological zealotry that constantly downgrades safety of Australians was not adopted by the government, and I'm thankful that they woke up, listened and reinstated this particular position. The process shows, both of legislation and expenditure, the importance of Her Majesty's loyal opposition in fighting for reforms. We are Her Majesty's loyal opposition. We are loyal to all Australians, and we can expect that in the next few weeks and months that Labor will continue its responsible attitude towards national security.
I thank the member for Melbourne.